They thought the king's secrets were buried forever, until a hidden recording surfaced, revealing his final words to the one man who dared to defy the crown. What he said in those last moments shook the entire royal legacy, proving truth can outlive even power itself. Stay till the end to hear the message the world was never meant to know, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. The envelope weighed almost nothing, but to Sergeant Lacklan Reic, it might as well have been a stone dropped on centuries of tradition. The order was simple: deliver in person, no staff, no escort. There was no seal of ceremony, no trumpet of announcement, just the royal crest embossed in gold and the king's own handwriting along the flap. Deliver to the Queen Consort. He had stood through coronations, state burials, and riots in the streets, but never had the palace felt this hollow. The East Wing corridors were silent, not with peace, but with hesitation. Doors closed just a little too quickly. Aides spoke in whispers that never finished sentences. Reic passed them all without a word. Guards did not speculate, they observed, they remembered. And this morning, the heir remembered more than anyone dared to say. The footman by the green parlor gave him a single nod. Her Majesty is expecting you. That was not true. She was not expecting this. He knocked once, not as request, but declaration, the kind that made silence lean forward to listen. The delivery Camilla turned when he entered. No crown, no ceremony. Just a grey silk robe and an expression that had forgotten what calm looked like. Her daughter, Laura Lopes, sat nearby, flipping through documents, but even she stopped when she saw the guard's uniform. Reic approached, stopped 3 paces away, and held out the envelope. By order of His Majesty, he said quietly. Camilla frowned, took it slowly. Her fingers brushed the seal. And what is this? I am not authorized to speak of its contents, ma'am. Laura's eyes flicked between them. Mother, it's from Father. The Queen Consort's voice faltered slightly. That cannot be. She broke the seal. The sound of tearing linen filled the room, small, final, echoing against marble floors. The paper unfolded neatly, as if even grief had been formatted by protocol. She read one line, then stopped. Laura leaned forward. What does it say? Camilla's lips trembled as she passed the paper to her daughter. Laura read it aloud, voice soft at first, then breaking. By royal decree, under Article 5 of the Marital Charter, the position of Queen Consort shall be dissolved in full accordance with royal law. The words hit the room like a thunderclap in slow motion. Camilla blinked once, twice, her voice barely above a whisper. He cannot. Reic stood motionless. Guards were trained to ignore emotion, but even training had limits. Laura folded the paper tightly, fury lighting behind her eyes. You will tell him, Sergeant, that this is not final. Reic shook his head slightly. My orders are to deliver, not to carry reply. Camilla's composure cracked. So that is it? 30 years reduced to parchment and ink? The guard lowered his eyes. His Majesty signed it himself. The silence of power. The king's handwriting sat like scars across the bottom of the page. Not cold, but decisive. The kind of signature that left no room for doubt. Camilla sank into the nearest chair. For a moment, she did not cry. She simply stared. The way someone stares at the end of a story they never finished writing. I stood by him through wars of reputation, she whispered, through hatred, through whispers. I rebuilt his image from ashes, and now he writes me out of his own. Reic remained silent. His training demanded stillness, but his humanity twisted beneath it. Laura stormed toward the door. I will not let him do this in silence. Reic blocked her path. My orders include securing the premises until acknowledgement is received. Laura glared. You think you can keep me here? Reic's tone did not change. My duty is to protect the crown, from the outside, and sometimes from within. Camilla lifted her head slowly. "Let her go, Sergeant. The damage is already done." He stepped aside. Laura fled the room. Camilla looked back at the guard. "Tell me, Sergeant, when did loyalty become cruelty?" Reic answered without hesitation. "When the truth became too heavy to speak, ma'am." The weight of the crown, outside, the bells of Windsor tolled softly. Not for ceremony, for order. Each sound reminded Reic that the monarchy thrived not on love, but on structure. As he turned to leave, Camilla's voice stopped him. "Did he at least look me in the eye when he signed it?" Reic paused. His Majesty signed it in silence. Her eyes closed. A single tear fell, not of sorrow but of exhaustion. "Then he will die with that silence between us." Reic bowed deeply, then exited, the echo of his boots the only sound left in the parlor. In the courtyard below, aides were already whispering. No one dared speak the word divorce, but it was there, floating through marble and history like a ghost that refused to fade. Reic straightened his posture, looked toward the flag fluttering above the palace, and whispered to himself, "May duty never sound this hollow again." The next morning, Windsor did not wake the way it usually did. There were no horns, no bells, no official briefings. Only the sound of rain against glass and the rustle of distant curtains being drawn. The world outside the palace still believed everything was normal, a calm morning in the royal estate. But Sergeant Lacklan Reic knew that inside these walls, nothing was normal anymore. The Queen Consort's title had been stripped by decree. The document still lay on her desk, unopened since the moment she collapsed into silence. And now, behind those same walls, the man who signed it was alone, sitting in the king's private writing room with the door locked from within. The king, who could not sleep, Reic, stood guard outside the double doors, listening to the scratch of pen against paper. It was slow, deliberate, the kind of sound that meant thought, not routine. King Charles had been inside for nearly 3 hours. The footman who brought breakfast said he had not eaten. Even his aide-de-camp had been dismissed. Reic had seen kings in rage, in grief, in ceremony, but never in reflection. He shifted his stance slightly, the faint creak of leather echoing across the corridor. From the far end, Princess Anne approached, shoulders squared, stride brisk, eyes unreadable. She stopped beside him. "Is he still inside?" "Yes, ma'am." She sighed softly. "He will not come out until it is written." Reic frowned slightly. "What is written?" "The truth," Anne said quietly. "Or his version of it." Before Reic could respond, the door opened with a slow, deliberate creak. King Charles emerged. He looked older, not in years, but in weight. His face carried the kind of weariness that even crowns could not hide. In his hand, folded neatly, was another letter. The same cream paper, the same royal crest. "Sergeant Reic," he said softly. "You will deliver this one as well." Reic straightened. "To Her Majesty?" Charles hesitated. "To Camilla, yes. But this one, you will place it in her hand privately. No audience, no aides." "Yes, Your Majesty." The king's gaze lingered on him. "And Sergeant, when you hand it to her, do not salute. Just listen." Reic nodded once, then accepted the letter. It felt heavier than the first, not in weight, but in consequence. The private delivery Camilla had not left her quarters since the day before. The curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the sun, and the room smelled faintly of rosewater and old dust. When Reic entered, she did not turn. She was sitting near the fireplace, a cup of tea cold beside her. The royal decree lay folded on the table. He stopped at attention. "Your Majesty," her voice was quiet, but sharp. "Have you come to deliver?" "Another order, Sergeant? Has he decided to take my memories too?" "No, ma'am." He held out the new envelope. "This one is handwritten." She looked at it as if it were poison. "And what am I meant to do with another piece of paper?" Reic said nothing. After a moment, she reached for it. Slow, hesitant, trembling. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was not a decree. It was not stamped or sealed. It was simply a letter, written in Charles's unmistakable cursive. The king's words. To Camilla, not the queen consort, but the woman who stood by a man long before the world did. I have done what duty demanded, not what the heart desired. The monarchy cannot afford more storms, and the public's faith has become fragile. You became my strength when I had none, and yet the same love that saved me now threatens the very crown I swore to protect. This decree is not punishment, but protection. From whispers, from headlines, from the endless weight of perception. If there were a world where love and duty could coexist, we would have ruled it together. Forgive me not as king, but as the man who loved you beyond reason. I, Charles. Camilla's hand shook as she read. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Reic looked away out of respect, but her voice found him again, trembling yet steady. He hides behind words, she whispered. He always has. He cannot say them aloud, so he writes them where no one can hear. She folded the letter gently, almost tenderly, and looked at the guard. Do you know what this means, Sergeant? Reic answered carefully. It means His Majesty still cares. She gave a small, bitter laugh. No, Sergeant. It means he still wants the world to believe caring and abandoning are the same thing. She rose slowly, setting both papers, the decree and the letter, side by side on the mantel. One written in cold ink, the other in warmth. Tell me, she said quietly, when he signed the first one, did his hand tremble? Reic hesitated. No, ma'am. Then he has already buried the man I loved. The guard's reflection. When Reic left the room, the corridor felt longer than before. The rain had stopped, but the silence remained. He passed the old portraits, queens, kings, consorts of centuries past, and wondered how many of them had lived through love shaped by law. At the far end of the corridor, he paused to look out the window. The king was walking alone across the garden below, his coat unbuttoned, head bowed, a ruler surrounded by acres of silence. Reic whispered under his breath, You can rule a kingdom, but you cannot command forgiveness. That evening, the king ordered all official photographers away from the grounds. No statements were issued. No press leaks followed. For once, the palace kept its silence, not to hide scandal, but to mourn quietly for something no decree could erase. Windsor slept, but Sergeant Lacklan Reic did not. He stood in the courtyard beneath the pale wash of moonlight, hands clasped behind his back, eyes fixed on the tower that housed the Queen's chambers. A single light burned still, faint, flickering, alive. It had been nearly 20 hours since the king's private letter was delivered. 20 hours of silence from a woman who had once commanded a room with nothing more than her presence. But Reic knew silence was never absence. It was the sound of something building, and tonight, something was building, the letter in the making inside her quarters. Camilla sat at her writing desk, the king's handwritten letter spread open before her. The ink had dried, but its words still bled meaning with every reread. Her reflection in the mirror behind the parchment looked like that of a stranger, regal but hollow. A queen stripped of everything but the echo of her own strength. She reached for a fresh sheet of paper, smooth and crisp. Her pen hovered above it, trembling slightly. Then, without hesitation, she began to write. To Charles, not my king, but the man who once made me believe crowns could be human. Her pen scratched furiously, emotions flowing faster than logic. You wrote of duty and perception, of storms I caused and peace you needed. You speak of protection, but tell me, who were you protecting when you erased me? The monarchy? Or the mirror that shows you what you have become? Her hand did not pause. You built your reign on the promise of truth, yet when truth came wearing my face, you buried it beneath silence. You feared not scandal, but me, the part of your story that history could not rewrite. The ink splattered slightly as her grip tightened. If love is measured by sacrifice, then know this. I sacrificed my name, my youth, and my peace for a man who could not bear to stand beside his own shadow. She paused, tears streaking the page. Then she wrote the last line. You wanted the world to remember you as king. I will remember you as the man who chose the crown over the woman who made him worthy of it. She set the pen down. The fire crackled behind her, its glow flickering across the ink. She folded the letter once, sealing it with red wax, the same crest that once symbolized unity, and below the seal she wrote one word. Deliver. The midnight summons. At exactly 2 a.m, the Queen's attendant arrived at Reic's quarters. Her Majesty requests your presence. Immediate delivery. Reic rose from his desk, straightened his uniform, and followed in silence. When he entered her chamber, Camilla stood tall, not broken, not trembling, but radiant in defiance. Her robe was simple, her pearls gone. What remained was dignity, raw, unadorned, untouchable. She held out the sealed letter. You will take this to His Majesty directly. No intermediaries. No record, Reic bowed. At once, ma'am. But as he turned to leave, her voice stopped him. Sergeant, she said, softer now. Do you believe love and loyalty can exist in the same heart? Reic hesitated. Only in those strong enough to lose both. A faint smile touched her lips. Then deliver it quickly, before he forgets how to feel. The confrontation. The king's study was dim when Reic arrived. The hour was late, but Charles was still awake, surrounded by half-read documents and a glass of untouched wine. When the guard entered, he looked up wearily. Another letter? Yes, Your Majesty, Reic said. From the Queen. Charles took it, turning it over in his hands. His thumb lingered on the wax seal, the same one he had broken just the day before. He unfolded the paper. The silence that followed was long, sharp and alive. With every line he read, his face changed, not with anger but recognition. His breath grew uneven, his eyes wet, his lips trembling around words he could not form. Finally, he looked up. She wrote this? Yes, sir, Reic said quietly. Charles sank into his chair, the letter still in his hands. Do you know what she has done? Reic met his gaze. She has spoken what others feared to say. The king looked at him, eyes hollow. She has destroyed me, Reic shook his head. No, sir. She has remembered you. The moment of truth. For a long time, Charles said nothing. Then he stood and walked to the window overlooking the courtyard. The moonlight caught the edge of the letter, making it glow faintly in his trembling hands. He whispered to himself, almost too softly for Reic to hear. All my life I feared becoming my mother, stoic, unreachable, trapped in duty. And yet I have become worse. I have loved without courage. Reic said nothing. The king turned to him, eyes glistening. You served 2 monarchs, Sergeant. Tell me truthfully, what makes a ruler worth following? Reic straightened. The ability to stand by what he breaks. Charles nodded slowly, a tear falling onto the parchment. Then I have much to repair. He folded the letter once more, kissed the seal softly, and placed it inside his desk. Sergeant, he said quietly, from this moment forward, no one must know of this exchange. If this letter ever leaves this room, it will not destroy me. It will destroy her. Reic saluted. Understood, Your Majesty, but as he turned to leave, Charles added one final command. Burn the decree I sent yesterday. The world will never know, but I will. That will be enough. The silent fire by dawn. Smoke rose from the royal incinerator. Inside the furnace, the original divorce decree, signed, stamped, sealed, turned to ash. Camilla's letter, however, remained locked inside the king's desk. 2 truths, 2 letters, 1 silence, and somewhere deep within Windsor's walls, Sergeant Lacklan Reic realized something few men ever do, that even royalty bleeds when it tries to love honestly. He whispered under his breath, A crown may hide the heart, but it cannot silence it. Morning returned to Windsor, but peace did not. A fog had rolled in over the Thames, heavy and motionless, wrapping the palace like a veil. Behind its mist, rumors began to move, quiet at first, but too steady to be ignored. The kind of whispers that did not come from outside reporters or servants, but from within the royal walls, and all of them had one name attached. Camilla Darda photograph. No one was meant to see Sergeant Lacklan. Reic walked his morning round through the south corridor leading to the king's private study. His routine was unchanged: step, turn, pause, observe. But as he approached the hallway intersection, something caught his eye. A young palace aide, uniformed, nervous, stood frozen near the door. In his hand, a tablet screen glowed faintly. When Reic called out, the boy startled, trying to hide it. "Maintenance log, sir," he said too quickly. Reic's instincts, sharpened by decades of service, picked up every tremor in his voice. He stepped forward, hand extended. "Let me see it," the aide hesitated. "It's private correspondence, sir, for the communications office." Reic's tone hardened. "Now." Reluctantly, the boy handed it over. On the screen was a photograph. Grainy, cropped, and badly lit, but unmistakable. The king's writing desk. A single sheet of cream paper. The red royal crest, and the king's signature visible at the bottom. But it wasn't the divorce decree. It was Camilla's reply. Someone had photographed the queen's letter, the one meant to stay locked forever. Reic's blood went cold. He spoke carefully. "Where did this come from?" The aide swallowed. "Sir, I swear I didn't take it." It came through the archival feed, the auto-capture system in the king's office. "The new scanners record documents for preservation before destruction." Reic's eyes sharpened. "Who accessed it?" I think it was routed to the internal comms drive, then forwarded to the press desk. "They think it's a statement." Reic's voice cut like a blade. "No one was supposed to see that letter." He took the tablet, switched it off, and stepped back. His training told him to report it immediately. His instinct told him to act first, because if that image reached the outside world, it would not just start a scandal. It would end an era. The Chamber of Panic. Within the hour, the private communications office of Buckingham Palace went into lockdown. Phones were confiscated, servers shut down, and everyone with access to the internal feed was questioned. The king sat in silence at the head of the chamber table. The photo, printed now on glossy paper, lay in front of him. Across from him, Prince William paced, fury barely contained. "Who took this?" "No one is admitting," said the aide-de-camp. "But the metadata shows it was uploaded from Windsor's East Wing, 20 past midnight." Charles closed his eyes briefly. "She wrote that letter in that room." William stopped pacing. "You mean she's been watched the entire time?" "Every document in this palace is archived by default," Charles said bitterly. "Even the ones meant to be private. The machines record what men cannot see." Reic stood by the door, hands clasped behind his back. He had not spoken once. William turned to him suddenly. "Sergeant, you were on duty that night. Did anyone else have access to the king's study after you left?" "No, sir," Reic said. "Only the cleanup staff. But the system scans automatically when the lights come on." Charles exhaled slowly. "Then the fault is mine," William frowned. "Sir," Charles interrupted, "I built a kingdom on transparency. And now transparency has finally come for me." He looked at Reic. "Sergeant, where is the original copy of her letter?" "In your desk, sir," Reic replied. "Locked under biometric seal." Charles nodded grimly. "Then move it. Burn the scan archives, erase the metadata, and send a notice through the press office." William raised a hand. "Father, if you bury this, the leak will double." "The press already has the file." "They'll publish in hours," the king's voice hardened. "Then I will release it myself." The guard's decision. After the meeting dispersed, Reic followed the king into his study. "Your Majesty," he said quietly, "may I speak freely?" Charles nodded. Reic hesitated. "If you release this letter, the world will see her pain as scandal, not truth. They will turn her confession into entertainment." The king sat behind his desk, staring at the photograph. "And if I do nothing, they will turn me into a coward who hid behind duty." "Perhaps they will," Reic said. "But silence can sometimes protect what words destroy." Charles looked up sharply. "You think I should bury it?" Reic met his gaze. I think you should honor what it meant. She wrote to you, not to them. The king leaned back, rubbing his temples. And yet every secret we keep becomes a story someone else will tell. He paused, voice lower now. What would you do, Sergeant? Reic did not flinch. I would protect the letter, not as evidence, but as memory. The Crown does not need another confession. It needs closure. The leak that never was that night, the internal photo database vanished. No statement was released. No press alert followed. Every file, every backup, every trace of the scanned letter was deleted by Reic himself. He moved through the archive halls with military precision, one command after another, wiping centuries of digital records in silence. It was treason by technicality, but to him it was mercy. When it was done, he placed the last printed copy of the leaked photo into a small, unmarked envelope and slipped it under the Royal Archives door. On the front, he wrote only 2 words, for history. Then he walked out into the dawn. His reflection caught faintly in the palace windows. He had erased everything, and yet preserved what mattered most, because sometimes truth does not belong to the present. It belongs to the future, when people are finally ready to listen. 40 years had passed since the fires of Windsor cooled, and the last whispers of King Charles's reign faded into the echo of history books. The monarchy had endured, rebranded, modern, endlessly public, but beneath the marble surface of Britain's most guarded institution, something ancient still slept. And one morning, in the Royal Archives beneath Buckingham Palace, it awoke, the Discovery Doctor. Eliza Wren, historian and curator of the Crown's Lost Correspondence Project, had spent 3 years cataloguing forgotten letters from the late 20th and early 21st centuries. It was routine work, fragile documents, broken seals, faded ink. She was young, brilliant, and stubborn enough to care about things everyone else had decided were irrelevant. That day, she was deep within Section C12, restricted unindexed, the last of the old paper vaults. Her assistant, Miles, called out from behind a cabinet. Dr. Wren, there's something odd here. She turned. Odd? He pointed at a narrow space between 2 catalog boxes, dusty and untouched. Wedged in the gap was an unmarked cream envelope, yellowed with age. Eliza reached for it carefully. The wax seal had long since cracked, but the imprint remained faintly visible, the royal crest, hand-stamped in deep crimson. Her eyes widened. That's not standard archive seal. She turned it over. 2 words were written in faded black ink across the front. For history. Miles frowned. That's not an official marking. Eliza's heart beat faster. No. It's personal. She slid a scalpel beneath the fold and opened it. Inside lay a photograph, worn, grainy, but unmistakable. The king's desk. A handwritten letter. A visible royal crest. And on the back of the photograph, in precise block handwriting, do not erase truth. Let time decide its worth. S.L. Reic, the forgotten name. Eliza froze. S.L. Reic, Sergeant Lacklan Reic, she whispered. Royal Guard 2020s. She looked up at Miles. This man's name was never part of the official record. His file disappeared after 2030. He's not in the staff logs. He just vanished, Miles frowned. You think he hid this? Eliza nodded slowly. No, he protected it. She pulled out the second sheet from the envelope, a brief archival memo, unsigned. The letter remained sealed in the king's desk under biometric lock. No record of destruction. No digital copy remains. The photo is all that's left, she exhaled sharply. He erased the evidence, but he made sure history would find this. The revelation hours later, Eliza sat at her research terminal enhancing the image. Slowly, words began to emerge from the blurred photograph. The handwriting, delicate, looping, was Camilla's. She isolated the clearest lines and read them softly aloud. You feared not scandal, but me, the part of your story that history could not rewrite. You wanted to be remembered. As king, I will remember you as the man who chose the crown over the woman who made him worthy of it. Miles leaned closer. So it's true. The divorce story, the letters, the silence, all of it? Eliza nodded, her voice trembling. They erased her voice from the archives. Every speech, every decree. But this... She gestured to the photograph. "This is her last word." "And he never released it," Miles whispered. "Then why did the guard keep it?" Eliza smiled faintly. "Because even soldiers know truth outlives orders." The broadcast that evening. Eliza appeared live on the BBC Historical Forum. Behind her, the photograph flickered on the studio screen. "This," she began, "is the only surviving image of Queen. Camilla's private letter to King Charles III, a document long, believed destroyed after the internal Windsor scandal of 2026. The man who preserved this was a Royal Guard. Sergeant Lacklan Reic, who, instead of betraying his duty, redefined it." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "He wrote 3 words on the back: 'Do not erase truth.' Those words are not rebellion. They are devotion, not to a monarch, but to history itself." The host leaned forward. "Dr. Wren, what do you believe the letter meant to the king?" Eliza smiled softly. It meant he was still human, and that somewhere in his silence, he hoped someone, someday, would understand. The legacy. 2 weeks later, the British Museum opened a new exhibit, The Letters They Tried to Forget. At its center, displayed under low light and bulletproof glass, lay the photograph, the final fragment of a secret love that had outlived a crown. Beside it, etched in gold on the plaque, were Sergeant Reic's words: "Some truths are not meant for kings. They are meant for time." Visitors stood in silence. Some wept, others smiled, but all understood. The letter was never meant to shame. It was meant to remind. The monarchy had survived, not because it hid the truth, but because decades later, one forgotten man had ensured that it could finally be seen. That night, as the museum lights dimmed, Eliza stood before the glass case. She whispered quietly to herself, "History keeps its promises." And somewhere in the long corridors of Windsor, a portrait of the Royal Guard still hung, inscription faded but legible beneath the dust. Sergeant Lacklan Reic, keeper of the truth. It began not with a discovery, but with a sound. A faint, distorted crackle inside an old archival recorder. One forgotten device, buried deep in a box labeled non-catalogued audio Windsor Private. No timestamp. No metadata. Just static, until a voice broke through. "Sergeant, turn it off if it hurts to hear." It was King Charles III. The rediscovered recording. Decades had passed since his reign ended. The world had changed. Monarchies had softened, borders redrawn, crowns turned into museums. But inside a quiet corner of the Royal Sound Preservation Department, a young intern named Amir Patel pressed play on history itself. He sat frozen as the static cleared, and the unmistakable weight of the king's voice filled the room. Older, slower, but clear. "This message is for history, not for headlines. If you're hearing this, I am already gone." Amir's pulse quickened. He raised his eyes to Dr. Eliza Wren, the same historian who decades earlier had uncovered the For History envelope. "Is that—" Eliza nodded, breathless. "Yes, it's him." They listened. The king's final confession. "They will say I ended my marriage for the crown. They will say I signed away love for order. But the truth is simpler. I broke what I could not bear to lose. Because power teaches you one lesson. You cannot keep both peace and love." His voice cracked. A pause, long, shaking, human. "Camilla wrote me a letter once. I kept it locked away, not because I feared it, but because I could not live up to it. Every word she wrote reminded me that I had loved imperfectly. When she died, the letter was placed on my desk. Sergeant Reic asked if I wanted it destroyed. I said no. I told him to let time decide. He understood." Eliza froze. Her hands trembled. He knew about the guard's final act. The tape continued. "History will paint me with mercy or cruelty. It does not matter. But if you find this recording, know this. The true crown never sat on my head. It sat in the hand of a soldier who chose truth over obedience." Silence. Then one final line. "Tell him, thank you." And the recording ended. The guard's legacy. Eliza leaned back slowly, tears glinting under the lab lights. "He never forgot him," she whispered. Amir exhaled shakily. "So Reic didn't vanish. The king protected him." Eliza smiled faintly. "No, he freed him. Reic's file was erased because the king ordered it. He made him disappear, so he could live as a man, not as a god bound by silence. They looked at each other. The story had come full circle. Love buried, truth preserved, and a king's final words immortalized not by power, but by gratitude. The memorial a year later, the Windsor Truth exhibit reopened with one final addition, a dark oak plaque beneath the display of Camilla's photograph and the For History envelope. Etched into it, the newly transcribed words from the king's recording. The crown endures not because of silence, but because of those who protected truth when no one else would. King Charles III, and beneath it, smaller, but carved with reverent precision, Sergeant Lacklan Reic, 1985-2048, Royal Guard, Keeper of Truth. Visitors who came to see the crown jewels found themselves drawn instead to the sound installation nearby, a soft, looping playback of Charles's last words. Every time the recording reached the final sentence, "Tell him thank you," a faint chime played, echoing through the hall like forgiveness finally released. The eternal message as night fell over London. Eliza stood before the display one last time. The glass reflected her face beside the guard's engraved name. She whispered softly, "He delivered more than a letter. He delivered history." Behind her, the recording looped once more, a king's voice rising from silence. "If truth outlives power, then the world has learned something from me after all." Eliza closed her eyes and smiled. "Yes, Your Majesty. It has." The lights dimmed. The exhibit doors closed, and for the first time in a century, the story of the Royal Guard and the Queen's letter ended. Not in scandal, not in secrecy, but in peace. Because in the end, even kings can whisper thank you to those who dared to remember what they tried to forget. If you believe truth never dies, it only waits to be heard, then like this video, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe, because some stories don't fade with time. They echo forever.